It is an epic historical story because at sidewalk level, Hillary Clinton, her candidacy for President of the United States is done. It's over here in the snows of New Hampshire.
That was pundit Mike Barnacle, who makes his living by making predictions. Donations are now being accepted for the Mike Barnacle Career Change Fund. You can just send them to me. Now, Juan, to what extent is something like that Barnacle's fault, or the fault of any announcer who goes on the air with poll results? And to what extent, God, I just thought of something terrible. What if that was just his gut? And yeah, poll results. And to what extent is it the fault of the people who come up with the polls themselves?
Well, I think you speak of gut. I think of bile. I think there's a lot of anger at the Clintons, and I think there was a, sort of a readiness. People saying this is the end of the Clintons. Hallelujah. We're sick of them. And then, of course, they play on the idea that we've had Bushes and Clintons. But when it comes to the horse race, I don't think he was going with the horse race. I think he was going with glee that he'd finally seen the powerful fall from their perch.
But I mean, there is a way to do this, Rich, and I'm sorry to be plugging someone from Fox because I don't like the subjective sound of that. But Brit Hume, a few minutes after 8 o'clock on that night, said that we think Obama will win his primary, the New Hampshire primary, 39 to 34. At this point, Hillary was leading 36 to 34. But he said, we're not making a prediction. We don't know. This just seems to be what the polls are showing us. Nothing official. That's what he was saying. Now, that seems to me, if you're going to use polls, that seems to me the safest way to do it, better than buried in the snows
that's
of New
Brit,
Hampshire.
Sober, cautious, professional. While we're plugging Fox people, let me say the one person I saw in the run-up to New Hampshire who kept his head about him was Juan Williams, who said, look, I've been going to these Hillary events, and I see something there, and I'm not buying this Obama tidal wave narrative. I think two things went on here. One, look, all the polls were wrong. The internal polls of the campaigns were wrong. But one, there's a pack mentality in the media where we all whip each other up. And two, there's been a culture of predicting that I think goes back to the McLaughlin group, 10 or 15 years ago, where it's not enough to just report what's happening, but you have to say what you think's going to happen, and that's a much dicier business.
All right, while we're on this theme, Jane, you look lovely today, and would you have a drink with me after the show?
Why, thank you.
I got one word for this while you are considering
Jane
that.
needs a little time to recover.
One word is 2000. Remember, there was a commission set up after the prediction that Al Gore had won the presidency. All of these polls were out. We're not going to do this anymore. We got to find out where we went wrong. We're going to be better in the future. It's just like going back to the fortune cookie at the end of the Chinese restaurant meal. People still open those things up. They still consider the possibility of truth in these. You turn them over, you get your lottery numbers. We'll never learn the lesson.
Well, here's the thing about the pollsters. The pollsters say one of the problems may have been that lower income white voters don't respond to polls, and that this was a big problem when you have lots of people making last-minute decisions. Now, they also have problems with people who have cell phones because they don't call them. Yeah. But we're seeing really the problem with polls. But the fact is, Eric, you know what? Viewers love the horse race. They want to know the poll numbers,
even if it's wrong.
I think so. I mean,
you're saying it's interesting at the time because obviously the horse that's trailing can be the leader by the time that he gets to the finish.
Who knows? There were lots of last-minute deciders, but the polls were right about. Interestingly, the polls are right about men in this race. They weren't right about women. We don't know why that is.
Jane, you mentioned Brian Williams last segment, NBC's anchor. He's not confident about polls ever getting it right. A great quote from him, which I'm synthesizing a little here. He says, "Give us a few weeks. We will all live to screw up another day, though our performance in New Hampshire will be hard to beat." So Brian's not giving us the usual line about, we'll get the polls right. Settle down, people.
Well, his predecessor, Tom Brokaw, was on Letterman, first on Chris Matthews, saying the pirouettes are amazing. I mean, again, everything's speeded up. This guy is toast. No, she's back. I think, to be fair to the pollsters, a lot of people changed their minds in New Hampshire in the last few days, according to the pollsters. I think for Mike Barnicle to say the word on the street, you know, I, as a viewer, go, what street are you on, guy? You're talking to media people. You're talking to political people.
That
ain't my
That's
street.
so true. When you go to these events, as Juan knows, there's a media huddle in the back of the room, and we all talk to each other, and we all spin each other up. And in New Hampshire, at one event, it's sort of funny. A voter tried to intrude on one of these conversations. All the reporters ignored him. They wanted to keep talking to each other.
That's true. Perfect.